Hello, this is Inga Hansen, editor of MedEsthetics magazine. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to go ahead and get started. If you have any questions during the webinar, you can type them into the box on the right-hand side of your screen, and we will answer them at the end of the presentation. Today we'll be talking about carboxy therapy and specifically new developments in the use of carbon dioxide as a delivery system for topical serums, scope of practice issues, and key indications, including a new carboxy therapy-based treatment called CooLifting that non-invasively affirms skin. Our presenter is Sam Niedbala. He's the founder and CEO of CryoConcepts and has worked in the field of cryotherapy for more than 25 years. He's a faculty member in the Department of Chemistry at Lehigh University, where he teaches in areas of clinical chemistry and regulatory affairs. He's also the former Chief Scientific Officer and co-founder of OraSure Technologies, a publicly traded diagnostic company that develops, manufactures, and markets proprietary immunodiagnostic tests and other medical devices. Welcome, Sam.
Thank you, Inga. And welcome, everybody. I want to thank you for taking some time out of your schedules to listen to the seminar today, and hopefully you come away with some good information and knowledge and understanding about this developing field of carboxy therapy. To get us going here, if I could move my slides. All right, let's talk through our presentation topics. So we're going to lead into this a little bit differently in that what we're going to cover is the history of cryo and carboxy technologies. It's a little hard to separate the two, and the connection between them becomes evident as we go through the technology discussion. And as it was said in the introduction, I've done this for a very long period of time, but in just the last few years, as carboxy therapies and technologies have been developing, what you find is this is a mousetrap that's been around for a long time, but in the new forms that we have today and the combinations of technologies really give a boost and are appropriate for aesthetics practices. With that spotlight on carboxy therapy, what you'll see is that now in today's world, where when people come in for a treatment in an aesthetics practice, one of the things they look for is not only a long-term benefit, they look for that instant effect. And this is one of the things that carboxy therapy brings in a way that's really pronounced and is just a great part of what the technology platform does for each individual. Those applications and benefits are somewhat evident, but again, it's something that's been around for a long time, and I believe fell out of vogue some decades ago, but is on the rebound now as we see new forms of it developing. One thing that's also critical, besides covering the technology and the potential uses of a therapeutic area in aesthetics practices, also the scope of practice issues themselves and what estheticians are allowed to do. And so we're going to cover that at the end. And then finally, as we said, we would go to the questions and answers. So by all means, please come out with whatever questions at any point in time. You have the text box over there in which you can type your questions, and we'll be happy to address them. And hopefully we can get them all as time allows. So let's talk a little bit then about the field and a brief history of first cryotherapy. And cryotherapy, cold is one of those things that has been used for a really long time. But you have to remember, it's only about 100 years ago, a little longer than that now, that a lot of the cold gases that we today use in so many different ways, from making our sodas to doing treatments like we're doing here in aesthetics medicine, came about. And so it was really about 1911 that I could find the first references that looked at the use of carbon dioxide specifically for use in treating a lot of the lesions that, of course, are with today. But in those days, when I go back to some of the old textbooks and journal articles, and you see women in their Victorian outfits but being treated for the same things that we see today, you realize that it's been around for a while, but the way it's used and the understanding of what it can do is what's really been developing over the years. And if you think back a century ago, there was the initial discovery of what a lot of these gases or how these gases can be manufactured, how they might initially be used. But as we went through the First World War, the Second World War, there was a lot of focus on technologies that made colder gases like liquid nitrogen. And in practices, typical physician practices, they became the gases of choice when it came to doing a lot of cryotherapy. But in essence, those are not appropriate for aesthetics because they are so aggressive that they can bring around more destruction than desired, and so it becomes more problematic than helpful from an aesthetics perspective. And as we look at 2018, now we see a period, a season of technology where applications range from cosmetic to surgical in the use of gases, but the understanding allows us to pick and choose which ones are most appropriate for the goals at hand. Now, let's just start at a very simple level and talk about cold and cryo and the physiologic effects that we see. So if you close your eyes, and I'm sorry you have to listen to me now for the next little while, but if you just think about it and take an ice pack and put it on a bruise or a sore muscle from the last workout that you did or something that you hit or something that you hurt, you know that cold by itself has a really good effect on your physiology. And what it's doing in those simple applications is it's vasoconstricting, or it allows dilation to go back and forth. And so, for example, sore muscles, when I use cold and then warmth, I get a net benefit effect of my healing time being much reduced. It also can reduce the activity of nerve endings, and so a slight numbing effect is never a bad thing when you have something that needs this therapeutic treatment of cold. It also raises your pain threshold. I've read many articles about people being able to exercise to extremes when they're put in a cold environment versus a hot environment. And I don't know where you all are today, but I can tell you in the Northeast near Philadelphia, it feels like 100 degrees, and the last thing you want to do is go out in that heat and humidity and try and exercise. So we know cold at its most basic level has benefits. The last of which mentioned here is really important. You'll see this play out in some of the ways that cold are used today in stimulate, which give us the energy, which help us to overcome the challenge of perhaps maybe a shock of cold and turn that into a benefit. Now, some really simple ways to do this, of course, are with an ice cube, with what we call a cryo globe, where you have a fluid-filled sphere that's been put in the freezer, and you might use that for lymphatic massage, for example, in aesthetics. And then also you go on the internet and you can find cryo cups. All of these vary in cost, but all of them are the same thing, which is that most basic of effects from cooling that just makes us feel good, takes away an edge, makes us ready to recover and move forward. Now, as you start to dig deeper into the brain and its responses to cold, one of the things that you see is it's certainly calming. We know that you can get to the point of too much cold and shivering, but in general, it makes us feel better. That's why we're all sitting in air conditioning more than likely today. It improves circulation. Cold makes us more efficient and makes us pump blood. And then finally, that stimulation of hormonal release. You cannot underestimate, as you all know, what hormonal release can do in terms of energy, but also in appearance. One of the things we fight all the time as far as an imperfection on the skin is melasma, which all of you know is caused by a hormonal change, mostly during pregnancy. So all of this relates back and forth to how our body reacts to stimulation, cold in particular. Now, there are a number of products that are out on the market that do all kinds of things as far as cold are concerned. So on the left-hand side, I have a Zimmer machine that some of you may even use during post-laser treatments, and it's really just a cold gas, and its intended use is to reduce the pain after a laser treatment. So you would see this brought out and then put over someone's face with the idea that cold is making them less susceptible to the post-trauma following laser, and there's many who really like this kind of technology. Obviously, an ice pack will do the same sort of thing. An ice cube will do the same sort of thing. And then on the other side, you go to products like CryoClear that's shown here, which is a spray of carbon dioxide. If you haven't figured out already, we're really big fans of carbon dioxide when it comes to aesthetics, using it in a couple different ways. And in this product, which I'll show you in a moment or two, we use a spray of dry ice particles directed at a lesion on the skin to remove superficial pools of melanin or tags. And so when you see this in action, you realize that there's a lot of ways that we use cold and cryo and deliver it in a variety of ways, some simple, some much more elegant and sophisticated. So let's take a look at a few of these others. One of them we mentioned a moment ago was CryoClear, and here what you're looking at is a spray of dry ice particles directed at the skin using the product. And this actually works where the particles are projected out of the tip of the device. Each of them has a small cylinder of carbon dioxide in it. And when it hits the skin, it acts almost as a blast, where it just very superficially at the stratum corneum and upper epidermis provides an abrasion where the particles will expand and then immediately evaporate, leaving behind nothing except a slight damage to that upper layer, which results in the removal of the accumulation of the melanin that may be in the spot. So that's a really nice, simple way of using cool and cryo because there's no downtime and it's a painless procedure. So we have hundreds of thousands of spots that have been treated this way. And by all means, let me continue to emphasize over and over, what we're doing here is elegant. We are not trying to treat something like a thickened wart or something that requires much more energy and aggression. This is about an elegant way to treat that superficial pool of melanin that previously was not removable by other techniques you may have, like abrasion or needling. And so you see the simple use of carbon dioxide in this case and its cool technologies brings about one type of change. Another kind of cryotherapy that some of you may have used or may even have in your practice is the deepest cold, as I call it, which are these chambers now that are really quite prevalent. And so although expensive, a lot of people really use the term swear by them in terms of rejuvenation and reduction in pain post athletic events. So you see a lot of professional athletes that use these cryo chambers as ways to give them an edge to help them recover more quickly. And so in these kind of cryo chambers, you strip down to your socks and underwear. Only your head is sticking out, and they fill the chamber with liquid nitrogen gas. So you have minus 196 degrees gas, and most people will sit in this for only a few minutes, at which point you get that instant deep chill. And you can picture this. Your body reacts. You get a flush of blood to the skin. You get an increased heart rate and therefore circulation. And in essence, post trauma from athletic events, you get a recovery that's been accelerated because of the cold and the shock that it brought and the therapeutic effect that it brings. And so there's a theme, if you notice, going on, and I forgot to say this in the last slide, but something like a CryoClear treatment to reduce or to remove a spot or tag is usually a 5 or 10-second treatment. Here we're noticing in a cryo chamber that you're sitting in it for only a few minutes. And so it doesn't take much or long for something to really bring about changes. On the right-hand side, some of you may recognize this is a canister of liquid nitrogen, which is often used at your dermatologist's practice. And this is where they're really trying to treat something large and deep, which is what it looks like on the finger of this person. And so the liquid nitrogen is actually a different kind of technology where it's a liquid gas resulting in a very deep freeze that will get rid of something that is large and really needs that. In an aesthetics practice, there's nothing like that being treated. You'd be referencing that out exactly to the dermatologist as shown here, but there are with your clients those areas that need a different type of touch, and this is where something like a spray of carbon dioxide can make the difference. And then finally, we get to looking at some of these chambers, and you've also seen pictures of athletes sitting in an ice tub filled with cubes and water. I don't know if any of you have ever done that one before, but we call that the James Bond. And if you may laugh right now, but hey, I got you on the seminar, so we'll take a moment here. But if you think about James Bond, and this is if there's any guys in the audience, in every movie, James is always pictured taking a shower somewhere in a hotel or a villa. And what you may not know is the lore of James Bond is that it's always a cold, ice cold, as cold as it gets shower, because for James, he wants to be stimulated and he wants to be ready to go on to whatever comes next in the movie. And this is the benefit on a real basis that all of the people like these athletes see as far as chronic pain and or recovery post-athletic events. So just to kind of summarize this section, then we're going to move on to carboxy therapy in a moment or two, is this idea that cold has therapeutic value. It's been around for hundreds of years. In the last 100 or so years, it's really been refined and tuned in a variety of ways. And so what we have today in aesthetics practices is the advantages of cold and the simplicity of using it, but the benefits are great. Obviously, on the other side of cold is fire, and there are products that use those kinds of approaches for a different kind of therapeutic approach. We believe that cold is one that, as a natural material, as a natural process, really brings the benefits, and that's where we'll head next as we segue over to topical carboxy therapy, which is the focus of our seminar today. So now let's talk history about carboxy therapy. I always love history. I love looking at old articles and things, and today there's still stuff in this area that you can buy on eBay from the 1940s and 50s and 60s, and that's because a lot of this was started back in the 1930s. We think we're so advanced today in a lot of what we do, but even back then there's actually great books about stories of people who were quite good charlatans and sold everything from alcohol with tree bark in it as curing everything you can imagine. But there were also technologies like this that only the best spas in Europe used, and they rejuvenated the skin, they reduced cellulite, they treated stretch marks, and they firmed the skin. So back in the 1930s, sounds like they had a lot of the same desires that we do today in terms of what technologies might bring. And so for those who had the means in those days, there was extensive use in Europe and availability. If you think about us in the 1930s, that was post-Depression, so this really comes in terms of popularity from Europe. And even today, as I talk to a lot of people about carboxy therapy, many people, especially from Eastern Europe, will reference it as something that they grew up with and are familiar with. So in the history of carboxy therapy, the way this was done is you had devices which I think were not so easy to use, but they were basically a spray of carbon dioxide that had two containers, one with the gas and one which had water, which was infused with various herbs or elixirs. And so through the 30s and 40s, this was something that was done quite often and had a variety of benefits that were cited along with it. So this is from some of the journal articles that were there. It almost reads a little bit today like what we might see in some product advertisements, but carbon dioxide bath both affects the blood vessels and the heart action. It causes dilation of the peripheral vessels, increasing pulse pressure, cardiac output, and blood pressure. And that was from 1949 by a Dr. Kovacs, who was reviewing the technology. So in these original carboxy delivery products, they had high pressure gas, which produced a spray that micro massaged the skin. It cleansed the surface and accelerated desquamation, or sounds to me like a form of microdermabrasion. The cooling effect of the spray toned the skin. The dissolved carbonic acid or carbon dioxide helped protect the skin against microbes. There was one more thing that they cited back then, which was something called the Bohr's effect, and I'll explain that one in a slide or two, and that helped to generate blood flow and oxygenation to the treatment area. So all of the things that were done back in the day are somewhat the same today, but there are new twists that have been put in because technology allows us to do so, and knowledge gained over the years has really been brought together to make that next generation. Now, before we get to that, though, let's look at some of the products. The one on the left, called the Carbotom, is one I've actually been able to find on eBay, and even some of the old advertisements from France, which were spas that were sending out postcards to potential customers about treatments. And so what you see on the left in the Carbotom, what's beneath what looks like the handle there is the container that had the liquid in it with the infused herbs. And on the right was a container of carbon dioxide, which had to be refilled after each and every use. Now, that is a huge amount of carbon dioxide that's being used, and there was no control over the flow of this. So the pressure of this thing coming out of there had to be really high. So, which proves the point over and over, as we know, which is people, for aesthetic purposes, even back in those days, were willing to undergo some pretty significant trauma, in a sense, all in the hopes of the longer, bigger picture of increased outcomes or better outcomes as far as the aesthetics are concerned. On the right-hand side was another product called the Atomos, and this is a 1958 picture of it. This was kind of the big boy when you were going to do lots of treatments. And so we have sort of the semi-disposable on the left-hand side and the big boy Atomos on the right-hand side, both basically working the same way. Just some other pictures from history. Back in 1958, the Ritz-Carlton was offering this treatment. And you can see the Atomos in the background there, where it had the infusion container sort of in the upper right. Let me just see if I use my, no, you could see this, but if you look here, and the rest of this was essentially the delivery of the carbon dioxide. On the right-hand side, back in the 1930s, is an advertisement from Madame Barbier, and she was showing the use of the Atomos as well, and the carbon dioxide delivery of it. So again, it was really popular and it was used all the time in those days, but then something happened in here that changed it. And I suspect that in the 1960s, as the first microdermabrasion instrumentation became available and there were some changes to using it for various purposes, I think this fell out of vogue, but nonetheless, It was a technology that was patented. It was protected through those days, and all kinds of things can still be found on the internet. I'm really not sure what this model was doing in this particular case, but it gives you some idea of all the ways that they advertised and had used this. Now, one thing I mentioned earlier, but want to spend time on one slide, which is the Bohr's effect and how we see this playing into it. Now, you know that when you breathe in oxygen into your lungs, there's an exchange for carbon dioxide and the red blood cells that have been circulating in your body. And then those red blood cells carry that oxygen back to the parts of your body that need it. Well, there's a little trick that can be done here if you use it topically, which is when you spray the carbon dioxide, there is a flush that you'll see as you use some of the newer generation carboxy therapy products. We believe that's the Bohr's effect taking place. And so at the surface, we get a release of oxygen. And this brings about an effect that they saw back in the old days with the products, although part of that, I think, was the violence of how hard they were spraying this thing, but also it was the carbon dioxide itself. And you saw that in the bullet points that I pulled out from some of the articles from physicians back in those days who published on what they saw as the main benefits of the technology. So there's science behind this, and remember, all of it is non-invasive, which is part of what makes this very interesting, and its effects are immediate after use. So today we have something called CooLifting that has come onto the market a few years ago. This is a cosmetic delivery device. There are no medical claims to this. It's essentially the carboxy therapy is the carboxy delivery of a serum with the coldness of the gas itself, controlled, as you'll see in the picture here, through a device that sprays a cosmetic formula at the surface of the skin, dimpling it, but also using the carbon dioxide as the propellant to bring the serum and under some amount of force infuse the skin. The idea here is that this combination of formula and carbon dioxide stimulate microcirculation and oxygenation. We see this oftentimes when people use it. There's a coldness to it, but there's a flushing that also occurs, which we interpret as the release of oxygen. This is an open platform concept with different serums, and again, compared to the old technologies that were uncontrolled pressure, this is controlled. It also, with the use of different serums, allows a focus that could not be done back in the old days, as we would say. And by all means, this is non-invasive, so it's essentially useful on in any situation. So just to cut to the quick, these are the kinds of outcomes that you generally see right after one of these treatments. You'll notice on the left is, I believe, a 55-year-old police officer up in Boston. And so on the right, you see just immediately post-treatment, you notice the cheek is a little redder. A lot of the fine lines have now disappeared, and the hydration is immediate. But it also, with time, if what we always advise people is leave this on ideally till the next day, you really see the plumping effect that will occur. And so when you use this, it's one of those really nice procedures that the immediacy of it is what everyone loves in an aesthetic treatment. The long-term benefit is undeniable, and so you see a benefit that really fits the market and the clientele and what you're trying to achieve in this sort of practice. And so this is just one service. A single service may last anywhere from a couple days to a couple weeks, but it depends on what you're starting with in terms of skin health. Also, the local environment you may live in. So what's recommended is if you're going to use it, you do a couple treatments in the first month. After which you get a reservoir effect, and then you can go on to some sort of maintenance. Now, the other place that something like carboxy therapy using CooLifting works is with complementary procedures. So this young lady had microneedling done, and so you can see the classic on the left, reddening and almost tomato look. After microneedling with a CooLifting treatment, which calmed, which helped oxygenate and circulate away a lot of what damage had just occurred. You see that she calmed down very quickly. And so people who are using this after planing, after abrasion, after a peel, it allows them to go back to their normal activities that day and feel the effects of what they had done to them as far as an ablative procedure, but also leave with that hydration, that plumping, the benefits that carboxy therapy brings. So you see by itself, you can use the CooLifting treatment, but in combination, you get benefits that you really can't do any other way today. And even in areas like the forehead, which as many of you may know, that's a muscle. That's not the same sort of effects of aging that you see around the eyes or around the mouth or upper lip. So even here we can see the fine lines reduce after a CooLifting treatment versus the left side, which was the before picture. So I hope you're seeing that again, the history of this points in a direction that says there's real benefit that can be gained through carboxy treatments. The difference nowadays is how you might be able to use it. And so if you summarize thinking through this in a typical aesthetics practice, you have the opportunity to make this the red carpet service. So a lot of people will come in before a big event. I was just at an event in Ohio last Friday night, and we had someone who flew in. They were going to their high school reunion that day, and they had a treatment before they went in because they just wanted to look that much better, seeing all their old friends. And then you have others who will do a treatment like at the bottom, where they'll get 3 or 4 services in a month, after which they will start to go to a monthly treatment for sustained results. And so the nice part about this sort of treatment is it's good on any Fitzpatrick number, and so anyone can get the procedure done. And for the most part, you're going to see young and old benefiting. We would say clearly between 40 and maybe 60, 65, 70. Those are like the ideal years. Again, you have to, I've seen people in their 70s and even 80s with beautiful complexion. So, one statement doesn't always fit all, but you as the aesthetic professional can make the judgment. But for people with fine lines and wrinkles and that little bit extra to make the difference, CooLifting and carboxy therapy is really a nice procedure to include. So as we start to summarize some of this, we see that carboxy therapy, can reduce inflammation. It calms and hydrates. So it's a great post-treatment procedure. And again, a lot of these you may be doing routinely, like microdermabrasion, chemical peels, microneedling, dermaplaning, any one of those that is going to lead to that insult in the short term, but would really benefit from the hydration and the calming effect. This is where carboxy therapy, because of its cold, because of the propellant that's used, and because of the formulations, really becomes a great alternative or adjunct in any practice. And the economics make sense as well. The benefits clearly drive this. Now, here's the way we look at this particular platform in today's day and age, which is think of a Keurig coffee maker in your kitchen. You can go to the rack and you can buy whichever kind of coffee you like, or tea, or any kind of herbal mix that you want. And in the end, what you get is exactly what's appropriate for your mood that day. So with your skin as well, there are different times for different kinds of formulas. And so we have a number of targeted serums that offer, like our original formula you saw in all those pictures, that is a more honey-like appearance. It goes on a bit heavy, and then as it dries in, this is where the intense hydration comes from, all the way to something like HA Advanced, which is just a lighter formula if you're only have a lunchtime and can come over for a treatment, or other serums like Factor V, which is a growth factor formula. In some of these cases, we do not seek out trying to develop our own formulas, but rather we go off the technology that others have. We just use the delivery vehicle of CooLifting to bring these things together for you to create the menu. And along those lines, there's one new one that's just come out, and we're kind of softly making this available to people to try, but this is one for cellulite, and this is a different kind of formula. I know many of you address cellulite in a variety of ways with technology. What is not different about this is the fact that you have to do 8 treatments to really get the benefit. So in doing so, we know that there's no immediate effects. So it makes me a little more nervous with this because there's high expectations when it comes to cellulite treatments. But there is no downtime, and it does take advantage of the platform that you may already have if you have a CooLift. So with CooLifting being able to do a variety of facial treatments, but now also expanding out to the rest of indications on décolleté, and in this case cellulite, you can see that the platform becomes open to a variety of different uses and situations, and so more of a tool in the aesthetics practice. So now, as we start to wrap towards the end of our seminar and we get closer to questions, I do want to touch base on one very important topic to everybody who's an esthetician around the country, and that is your scope of practice. So as you know, with the FDA, there's class 1, 2, or 3 devices. Class 1 is something like bandages or a wheelchair or something like that, whereas class 2, class 3 become more and more complex and risky. A class 1 device is the least risky, and I can tell you that for carboxy therapy and CooLifting, it's not even on any of these classes. The CooLifting product is treated as a cosmetic dispenser. There are no medical claims that go along with it. And so that changes things in terms of where CooLifting can be used. And so from a state board perspective, which is really what drives many of you, states like California have already been shown the CooLifting platform, and they're aware of it. And so it's now available throughout the US, which makes it a perfect kind of add-on for every esthetician. So with no classification and a cosmetic treatment, now you have something you could really offer with a variety of formulas, and so it becomes very useful then for each and every practice. And again, your particular clientele is what you would have to judge. So as we start to conclude, it's really a new era of non-invasive treatments using carboxy therapy and CooLifting. And the great part about it, or the cool part about it, pun intended, is that it is non-invasive. So, in a day and age when people are getting more and more resistant to cutting and the cost and what you can get from that, this is one that is easily done by any aesthetics practice, and it's within scope of practice for them, and it brings about that immediacy of result as well as the longer term sustainable benefits. And so it's really the perfect kind of treatment modality in today's practices, and we really like the way it works. We see a future here in terms of expanding upon the menu of different products and technologies wrapped around these gases. And since we've been such a big fan of carbon dioxide used in a variety of ways, it really fits the mission we have as a company. And so in the future, you should expect to see more of this from us, and hopefully bringing value to each and every practice that uses it. So with that, I'll say thank you on this part of the seminar. We're just about on perfect time here, and so I've got to now switch. I can't see your questions yet.
Oh, hi, Sam. Thank you so much. This is Inga at MedEsthetics, and we do have some questions coming in. Again, if you have any questions you haven't typed in, please share them. But one person is asking, does CooLifting have an effect on the facial adipose tissue like CoolSculpting and other cold devices?
Great question. I mean, I wish we all could come up with a different word besides cool for so many products right now, but CoolSculpting is a different kind of principle. It is not what this product does. And so the answer for this is it does not have an effect on the adipose tissue. This is superficial that way, whereas CooLifting, as you know, has both its pluses and minuses and a whole different set of risks that go along with it. CooLifting is FDA regulated and is considered a medical device where this is not.
And on the CooLifting device, the handheld device, can you control the power or aggressiveness of the treatment?
There is no sort of low, medium, and high setting. When it turns on, it comes out at one speed, and we train you on how best to apply it so that you maximize the time and the way you would use it to apply the cosmetics.
Great. And now, in terms of going back to, there's the CryoClear where you do the spot treatments for pigmentation. How long does that typically last, the results?
The results of a CryoClear treatment generally are permanent. There is the chance that people could repigment over time, but properly done, it will remove the spot, and then that spot will essentially fall off within about 10 to 14 days, and then that's it. Then there's pink behind there, and it will match in the color of the surrounding tissue over some period of time beyond the 14 days, and that's really it. But again, that's a different use of carbon dioxide from our focus on topical carboxy therapy today.
Right. And now I'm going back to the CooLifting device. We had a question about what is the price to bring that into your business for the cost.
Right. So the CooLifting product itself, depending on what it is you're getting and whether you're doing a launch event, which formulas you want, is anywhere from $7,500 to $10,000.
And are the serums typically ordered through you? Is it?
Yes, they are. So we have all of the support mechanisms for CooLifting set up here in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. We have all of the serums available, and so we take care of you as a customer anywhere in North America.
And are there any contraindications for this, either skin concerns or health concerns?
Great question. There are no contraindications per se with the use of any of the serums. We do suggest, and it's in our literature as well, that if you've had fillers, that you not use CooLifting for about 2 weeks till the fillers themselves have a chance to settle in. If you think about it, you're spraying this gas which has some amount of pressure to dimple the skin, and if I just put fillers in, there's always the risk that I might move something around. So that's really the primary thing that we would warn people not to do.
Great. And we do have one more question, but I also wanted to let people know, because I know some folks came on a little bit late and people might want to share this with their staff members, that within a day or so this will be available at medaestheticsmag.com/webinar and on the MedEsthetics YouTube channel if you want to review any of the information or go back to the beginning. And we did have a question that someone wanted to reiterate, how many treatment sessions do you recommend?
So for the maximum benefit, I would recommend 3 treatments in the first month, followed by a monthly maintenance. And we find that that works really well with most people because as estheticians, you have a relationship with your clientele. This is different than a visit to your doctor's office, whom you may see only so often, and it's rather short when you do. This is that ongoing relationship. So 3 times in the first month, followed by once a month thereafter, is really the best regimen we can suggest.
And what are people typically charging their clients per treatment?
So most clients who are successful with this are somewhere between $250 and $300 a treatment. Packages may be something different. I think the lowest I've ever seen is about $150 a treatment. And this is where you as the practice owner, need to evaluate your clientele and decide if something like that would fit within your client base. But most people are having no trouble in that price range.
Great. And it looks like that covered all the questions we have at this point. So I want to thank everyone for coming and joining us for this presentation. And also thank you very much, Dr. Niedbala, for this great presentation.
Thank you. And thank you, everyone, for taking the time out of your busy day to listen to this.